Thank you, Gillian. Good. Yeah, because there was a question online, like where did the evolution you know that trial from the other source of data?
Well, that was a bit, I just talked about that a minute ago, and I realised I skipped over it. I said everything was saying no, but I didn't explain it.
Yeah, but they could have dealt with it, but we could have done better, couldn't we?
Anyway, there we go.
Brilliant, thank you. So thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of the day. Is there anyone I'm meant to be speaking at the moment?
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm done. Yes, we're done. The problem is that you're sort of on duty. Well, no, but you feel that you are. You don't quite get that same sort of relationship. There's always someone to talk to or something else to do. Good. Sorry. Oh yeah, go to scale a couple of minutes. Yeah. Excellent, actually.
I was wondering. There's other models by my working place. They are like. Good enough. I'm awake. So this is my concentration face, drumming. I'm gonna fucking kill you. And then I am working on a scout face. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's here, James. Don't think they were here.
And the woman in blue is?
Yeah, she's coming
just
back.
left,
She's coming back, yeah.
Then yeah, I mean, they'll be running over. Yeah, she's pretty pivotal in extinction rebellion.
Is she?
Yeah, she won't probably talk about it. But she is.
Which one's this one? Which is who, sorry?
And she's in the picture on the
I
right
rate it.
side.
I rate it.
What?
I rate it.
You rate it?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, the food box is right.
Just doing the slides for the session
Sorry?
as well. Were you doing slides for the session
Yes.
as well?
Yeah, we are.
I did hand in some pictures and I just hope that they pick up. I
Oh,
was
okay.
just going to check.
Rosie.
In the peasant baking, living bread or something.
Let's just check. What is it, sorry?
Sorry. From Rupert Dunn.
From Rupert? So photo?
Brilliant, yeah. Can I just check that they're...
Yeah, come over.
Sorry, is that...
Hi. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Are you speaking?
I'm speaking tomorrow, in a session tomorrow, and immediately I'm just clocking there's no laptop up front.
No, so we're so I think that what we're doing is we're clicking through the slides here. So you have to send us the slides. We don't have. I don't think we have a connection to be able to put a laptop and do it from there.
So one major thing is that we've had a speaker drop out.
Okay.
And I've got a YouTube video that he's made recently, but it's 24 minutes long, and there are 3 clips from that I'm hoping to play with quite precise timings.
Okay.
So in my mind's eye, I was like, I would be on the laptop and just toggle to the right place and then play.
What we could do is we could put a link as we could put it as 3 of the same video, but then the link starts at a certain time. So maybe if you give us the time codes. Sorry, just the timing. So like you just say the first clip is at this time. 0:21.
Okay.
Second 3 minutes.
Okay. How long are you here for today?
We're here all day.
So if I catch you later on. The session's at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
I mean, I think we're going we've got half-hour breaks between each one. So come over.
Okay. Because I've left the notes on a laptop. No, I've got them. But yeah, so basically, if I get you the link, it's not in the presentation. It's just YouTube, and then 3 things, not all at the same time. If you know what I mean. Like one of them, then a bit of speaking from somebody else. So I'm going to break it up a bit just to salvage. But that sounds alright.
So you could actually, what you can do is on YouTube when you just scrub it to the point that you want, and then you can click share. And then a little bubble pops up. You can do at the time. So you can click the box, and then you just tick that box, and then do copy the link, and you'll see it have the time code in the link. You do that.
Who would I then send that to?
You can send it to our email, which would be. So just give us details of what your talk is.
What I could do is can you accept a Word document?
Yeah.
Because if that'll give you the layout of then this person speaks, then we'll play that clip. Then this person speaks, then we'll play these 2 clips.
Okay.
High pressure. One particular clip, I could let it go through, but it rambles a little bit.
It's up to you. In fact, you could we could do it on the slide presentations as autoplay. Maybe I'll speak to James right now. Maybe so. I think we've got a clicker, so you can click through if you want from there.
Right. The other issues are the 2 PowerPoints that I've got from the 2 other speakers. One of them I suppose is at the end. Basically, it doesn't run in a whole sequence.
Okay. Well, try and I need to just mic up.
Okay, sure, yeah.
What was the email address?
George. Oh, sorry. It's
Georgia or something.
So it'll be Mike.Bowden, B-O-W.
Mike. Is that like that, Mike?
Yeah, Mike.Bowden, B-O-W-D-E-N at Twisted Melon.
As it sounds.
Yeah, Twisted Melon. That's the one. .co. That's it.
.co.
.co apparently so.
Okay. Okay. Mike.Bowden @twistedmelon.co. Okay. At least then I can come up with a bit of a plan.
Yeah, just shoot us an email. Just tell us what you want. Because Hello.
So am I keeping the microphone later?
Running the mic. Sort of handing it for the Q&A. Yeah, wicked. Just literally, where is it?
it's on, and I'm just controlling the volume from there. So if someone puts their hand up, just give it to them. Essentially. And if they're like not talking to me, if they're going like that, maybe just and that's for this next session. Cool. I'll give you that. I'll just give you that now. Well, I'll leave it here. If you want to pick it up whenever. Just go for it. I don't know where the other ones go.
Welcome. I think, did everyone hear well? The microphone level is good? Yes. Well, welcome to this lunchtime session. We're joined by Vandana Shiva, Charles Dowding, Agroecology, and the session is hosted by Christabel Reed and myself, Ruby Reed. In this next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about learning about farming and growing. How can it be done well, and how can it be done well for as many people as possible, which is the really crucial aspect of this and of this entire conference. Really, it should be thinking about how can we really scale this movement for change? How can we communicate with new audiences, different audiences? And the three people on the stage today, I feel, are really doing that exceptionally well and in three very different ways. We're joined by Charles Dowding, who for the last 40 years has been pioneering no-dig, organic and soil management. He has his farm in Somerset, Homeacres, where he runs many in-person practical courses on no-dig growing. And he's also built a very dynamic and engaged following on YouTube, where he teaches many tutorials. We've also got Vandana Shiva, who needs little introduction and has just spoken on the main area so eloquently, who is an eco-feminist, an anti-globalization author, speaker, anti-GMO and environmental activist. She's written many books, most recently Terra Viva, published by Chelsea Green, who have their bookstall downstairs, and Resurgence, who has another stall just here, selling many of her other books as well. And then Agroecology is teaching, particularly using social media to access new audiences, making farming and growing cool, and linking together mental health, personal, collective, in very dynamic ways. So Christabel, shall I pass?
Thank you. So Ruby and I are sisters, and for the past 7 years we have been learning as we also create learning experiences through Advaya and through EcoResolution. And these two kind of different platforms cater to different audiences, but are essentially kind of two sides of the same coin. And they're linking the ecological with the spiritual, the political, and exploring the relationship between mental well-being with ecological and social well-being as well. And then 18 months ago, we had a different idea, and we kind of thought, well, maybe we're doing enough, but we couldn't put it down. And this is because we realized that whilst what we were learning about was so important and was creating this kind of opening up many different possibilities for new ways of thinking and new ways of being, we weren't actually learning the practical skills that we needed in order to build the alternatives. And so we came up with this idea of a kind of masterclass type platform, but for ecosystem restoration and agroecology, so that anyone, anywhere could access the skills they needed to start restoring their local environments and actively participating in agroecology in a way that was accessible and with open access. And we've been doing that and building for 18 months, and we're going to be launching in April, and it's called Earth, and we're very lucky to have a course with Charles and Vandana on the platform. And what felt really essential to us is the access to the skills, but also access to networks, and lastly, access to funds. So the membership revenue will go into establishing a community action fund, because we're a charity as well. And the Community Action Fund will exist to be able to offer participatory and trust-based grants so that members can both start and scale their restoration projects. Because, you know, whilst there's this big push for ecosystem restoration, as even the UN reports, there isn't the political will, the infrastructure, or the finance. I mean, there obviously is enough money in the world to do it, but it's not going to where it needs to go in order to really scale out restoration and agroecology as it's needed. And so that's really where our passion lies, is about creating real access and about removing the obstacles so that we can not just talk about the alternatives, but we can empower ourselves and each other and our communities to gather momentum and really start implementing and learning, and in that way heal our relationship with ourselves and with each other and with the natural living world as well. And we're just going to play a 1-minute video to show you a bit of Earth, and then we're going to start talking with our brilliant panel around the power of learning and teaching.
We learn from nature, we grow with nature. Join us in this exploration to create a livable world for all.
Welcome to Earth, the online skills platform where nature is our teacher.
They say if you give a woman a spade, she feeds the nation. That is what we believe.
Here, you can learn through actionable videos led by experts from around the world.
I want to show you about no-dig growing, how you can grow lots of lovely food in a simple way.
This is a place for you, no matter who you are, where you live, or what level you're at, to gain the skills to regenerate life at home, in your community, and for your ecosystem, whilst growing your health, happiness, and hope for the Earth along the way. We are Earthed. Join us.
So, first question. As I said before, each of our three panelists take a very different approach to change and a different approach to teaching. Vandana takes generally a very big systemic approach. Courses such as Gandhi and Globalization are run through Navdanya, on water wars, looking at kind of the web and entangled powers of global politics and global systems and how they impact the very local at the community level. Charles often takes a more practical approach on courses such as no-dig growing or how to make compost. And Poppy is really often speaking about this interconnecting web of the personal with the collective, on how we can grow and how growing can help us to connect with nature and improve our lives in the process. And so the first question, and they've all dedicated many years, most of their lives to doing this. And so the first question really is, why have you dedicated your lives to teaching? And why do you choose this approach that you each take, this distinct approach? And what sort of successes and outcomes have you seen? We'll have 5 minutes to answer by everybody.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I came into teaching by chance. I'm foremost a grower, and through the 1980s I was running my market garden very intensively and intensely. And then I started giving talks actually to horticultural societies, and it was so interesting. In those days everyone wanted to know about organic, and not about no-dig. But I noticed the thirst for knowledge, and I noticed that I could share it. And more over the years, and particularly now as I'm a bit older and I've got huge experience, and I'm not quite so involved in my garden physically, I've got a bit more time for growing, I want to share more. And what I find in teaching is that what I'm looking to do is to empower people with the practical knowledge. I want to make it as simple as possible. I wrote a book called Myths and Misconceptions about 6 years ago, and we put up a video about it on YouTube. And one of the comments was from a guy who said, your way of teaching is so different to what most people, how it's mostly done. He said, a lot of it, the teachers are trying to assert themselves and build their authority, and you stay as the student, and basically that's the relationship. And it's not about enabling the student to become, not a teacher in the end, which should be the aim. That's what I want. And so that's why I'm always looking in teaching. I think for me the important thing is that people understand. And one of my favorite feedback comments that I'm really happy when I hear is, that makes sense. And if someone says that to me, I know they've got it. And if they've got it, they're going to go and do it, because they've got what they need. They don't need a long list, they don't need a spreadsheet, they just need the essential knowledge. And a lot of things that are taught, sadly, at the moment, I see from what I see, it's about the spreadsheets and the details, and not really helping the student, the person listening, to understand the core details so they can practice, as you put it. And so that's the aim. Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
My segue into this world was from fashion. I was working as a model for about 5 years, and my experience in the fashion industry it's very, very much rooted in the extractive model that we talk about so much. And so my kind of move out of that was looking for things that could be an antidote to what I was experiencing in that industry, and food, eating good food and growing good food seemed to marry incredibly well and solve so many of the issues that I was experiencing both firsthand from my personal mental and physical health, but also the sort of community issues that I was seeing within the industry and also external to the industry. And at that time I was also understanding more and more about climate change, and so kind of all these different issues seemed to link back together nicely to food. And so when a lot of what I do is communicating on social media, and so I try to kind of paint a bigger picture of it and create an access point through a personal connection with food rather than a kind of abstract notion of how we can solve the climate crisis. It's like, actually this is about real humans, our genuine lived experiences and our tangible real interaction with soil, with food, with each other. So that's kind of what I try to offer, something that feels really real.
So, you know, I had a life in the academic world, and in the academic world there's a discipline. You follow and go deeper and deeper and deeper into smaller and smaller parts. And, you know, because I'd got involved with the Chipko movement, I'd become epistemically humbled that there are others who've never been to formal education who know much more. That education takes place in many, many places, including by living. That if you want the education for life, doing life is the way you get that education. And that's why, for me, my teachers became, you know, the women of the rural areas of India who were still living a life of working with the earth, generating livelihoods. And I left academics in 1982 to put myself at the service of nature and communities, taking me wherever it took, you know. If it took me to learn about mining, I learned about mining. If it took me to learning about dams, I went to the dams. But at the end of it, people say, oh, you've done so many different things. I always say, but they're not different things, they're different aspects of the same thing, which is about life. So what are the living processes? What are life's processes? Where do you get that education? And I wanted to pay tribute to the person who's really taken that, you know, through his life, dear Satish Kumar, who founded the Schumacher College. And actually, I call him my beloved bully brother because he bullied me into starting Schumacher like Earth University Beach Vidyapeeth at our farm. And over these many years, I realized you can only be a good teacher if you stop thinking you have the knowledge and stay open to learning. A good teacher is a permanent learner. Learning from nature, learning from others who are not considered to have knowledge because they don't have degrees, and learning from change, which is an amazing teacher. And you know, Schumacher College has its roots. When I first went to teach in 91, I went to the archives that the Shanti Niketan, the University of the East, where Tagore said we must learn from nature, is connected to the Schumacher College. And the Dowding Trust was opened by Elmhurst when Tagore told him to go and start a Shanti Niketan of the East. So I think learning from nature is the challenge of our times. And each of us, you know, you can start from fashion, you can start from farming, you can start everywhere, but you go to the same set of principles that are common to life in all its expressions. And learning that constantly is education and teaching. You know, I just want to say, you know, looking at all these magnificent walls of this city that's supposed to be a city of knowledge, Tagore had said, you know, the West locked its learning in concrete and brick walls. And therefore, it specialized in thinking about inertness. We in India learned from nature and the forest. Therefore, we learned life and never considered it inferior from the knowledge of the brick walls.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vandana. It was really interesting to hear you say about learning from nature and always remaining curious and new to more learning and not really being an expert is the impression that I got. And it was also the impression that I got from each person here. And it's that you can't really be an expert of nature. You can't really be an expert of farming, because how can you be an expert of something you are really a part of, a process, which is a natural living process? Also, when it comes to farming and growing, it's so contextual. So what works for somebody in one field perhaps won't work in the next door field necessarily, because it's of the local history of that tiny piece of land, or maybe what you're doing slightly differently at so many different interconnecting interrelationships that make the outcome always going to be different. So it's about principles, which I also thought was another recurrent theme that came up. When you spoke just now about the learning being locked up, and how can we open out learning outwards from these insular places to be able to be received by as many people as possible, is also, I think, this great kind of important impetus of this movement, because right now, where power is being concentrated into the hands of fewer and fewer and fewer people, the people who have this alternative way of doing things don't have the power to proliferate their knowledge, so we all have to work together to make a different network. I think it's quite ironic that the painting on the back wall is a rape. It's a painting of a rape of women. And the fact that the painting of the rape of the Sabine women sits on the back wall of a main room in a learning centre, and nobody even thinks twice about it, is no surprise that our current system functions along the same lines of rape and pillage.
Vandana, I'd love to ask about the experience of running Navdanya and how it's going as this kind of hub of education. And
I don't run Navdanya.
No.
Navdanya runs me. Runs me in the sense that that's where my learning is. And when you were pointing out to that painting, when I wrote Staying Alive, my first book in the 90s, I wanted to make sense of what is the kind of thinking that let people think the forest is a timber mine, and the women of Chipko say, the forest is our mother. And, where does the thinking come from? So I went into history of science, read Bacon, read Descartes, and a lot of the metaphors that Bacon uses is about torture and raping nature, So the knowing that came out of not just extractivism, but mastery and domination, to be an instrument of mastery and domination, I think is the part that we kind of, don't remember so well. My experience with through Navdanya is a book that's at the Resurgence stall. My autobiography of movements is downstairs with Chelsea Green, but the book on agroecology and regenerative organic farming, which is my 38 years of research on agriculture and work in building Navdanya, and all the research we've shown. Because, Descartes said, what is real is what you measure. But what you measure comes from what you see. And if what you see has shut off so much of reality, you're going to have a deeply misconceptual idea of the world, what the world is. So agriculture has been driven by this one category called yield. It yields more, it yields more. So when the Punjab problem happened, I said, what does it yield more of? And I found it was only commodities, just rice and wheat. Punjab used to grow 250 species of crops. Humanity used to eat 10,000 species of crops. Trading in 10 commodities and producing more of them by destroying biodiversity and colonizing the land is a mismeasure. So you've got to look at the whole as a system, and that's why we created indicators like nutrition per acre, health per acre, wealth per acre. Now I want to spend the next few years working on life per acre. The living system, the life of the soil, the life of the plants, the life of the insects. Parallel to our session is the session on insects right now, because all of it is interconnected. And me, Navdanya's experience has been Navdanya means 9 seeds, but it also means the new gift. The 9 seeds is the diversity. The new gift is the reclaiming of the commons, because I responded to the patenting of seed and monopoly of seed. But the commons include the land, include the soil, include the seeds, biodiversity, and the atmospheric commons. You know, the climate crisis should be talked about as an enclosure and pollution of the atmospheric commons.
Yeah.
Yeah? We should not reduce it to one indicator and just look at that one indicator, because it will not give us the processes that we need to think. And again, I mean, you know, Satish, a lifetime of guidance and teaching. Satish was part of the Bhudan movement, you know, the gift of the land, I mentioned it earlier. And I think we need to inspire many more people. I've been told in Europe and England, most of the farmers are old. I think if we can get 20 old farmers to give a gift of the land with a guarantee that we will take care of you while you go old, you don't have to go to an age-old home and be killed there, which is what happened in COVID.
Yeah.
You know, a new arrangement of gift giving, where the one who has the land shares the land among those who have the capacity to work, share the capacity to work with. You know, the word investment did not mean putting money and making money. That's Mr. Locke's definition, making money out of money. Investment meant to make something beautiful. And tribal peasants have talked to me and said, they don't say I'm going to go do agriculture. They don't say I'm going to produce food. They say I'm going to beautify the land. Mm-hmm. Because that's what good farming is. Yeah. So investment now has to go back to its original meaning. And I think the one thing Navdanya has taught us is resilience. You know, 2 years we've been getting flooded, usually because of the extreme. But, you know, we've saved all the seeds, and something or the other helps you out.
Yeah.
You know? So resilience is in diversity, and resilience is in giving up the arrogance of certainty and predictability. I think if there's one thing we have to prepare ourselves with, is the uncertainty that quantum theory teaches you, and the ability to deal with different outcomes with the same detachment. Yeah.
Thank you. Charles, I'd really love to hear you speak around that relationship between, because Vandana, you know, just talking about like this systems-wide approach to education, and Charles, I'm interested about, because you have such a practical approach, which I find so empowering and so helpful. And I'm interested from a personal perspective for you, how much of like this, is there a systemic driving force, like a kind of a passion that comes from that systemic outlook that drives your work to enable more people to learn to grow?
Kind of. It's.
Sorry, another bit. Do you think that systemic part has to, like, do you think there needs to be a systemic and a practical, or sometimes could there just be the practical side of teaching?
Yeah, very much both. I mean, that's the beauty of, I feel privileged that what I'm teaching is something that so many people can do. And any of us now could go away, if it was still light after this, you know, make a bed or something like that. You know, it's things you can do, make a compost heap. And just that being involved then is very healthy in so many ways and gives you feedback immediately. And so it draws you into the whole process. That's what's so lovely. Where I've found difficulty, though, in getting this knowledge out there over decades has been, it made me think of it when both of you were saying about knowledge being locked up. And that's locked up, not literally always in concrete and stone, but in hierarchical systems of learning and media. You know, that's where social media for me has been so brilliant, because the media, I've struggled always to get my work, my ideas out there into, say, I'll give you one very practical example. It's quite personal. I don't think you'll mind, though. The Daily Telegraph. I was like, God, I want to get an article in there. I'm sure there's, you know, a lot of people who would love No Dig, reading about it and try it in their gardens. And I don't know, the editor, for whatever reason, she was always express enthusiasm but never publish anything. And over the years this went on. And then I was at a book awards in London in 2017, and the book I wrote with Steph, we won a prize. And just going up to get that prize, happened to pass by the table of the Daily Telegraph journalist. And the editor said, "You won." It's like, what? It's like, you know, it turned it into some kind of conflict, a fight, a tussle. Whereas, you know, there's been that blockage of getting new knowledge out there because it treads on people's toes. And as I said before, you know, teachers tend to protect their knowledge, and is too defended and not made enough available. So that links to the other thing that I want to say about power. You know, power is a dirty word, or it's been made a dirty word, but it should be a glorious word, a bit like beauty. You know, in farming and gardening advisory, you know, that word beauty doesn't often come in, but I couldn't agree more with you about that. That, you know, if you do something beautiful, it's probably working. But power, the other one is, you know, we need to be empowered, and that links to some of what Ollie was saying in the first session. You know, there's a big bad world out there, but we're not able to knock it down by fighting it, and that just draws us into the fight, which is actually what they want. But what we can do is go in at the bottom, out of sight often, and do our thing, which in this case, for me, it's grow some food, and that empowers you, because you're outside of the loop of their system just with that one thing at least, and you're going to gain health, and that's where I'm finding it now exciting that science at last is getting drawn into this. You know, scientists for me have been also very difficult over the years because science has such a narrow definition, as we saw, you know, follow the science. I mean, so ridiculous. And because what was it? Nobody asked that. What is science? But there are now scientists looking at things like the biome and discovering that the soil biome is pretty much the same as the gut biome. And I said this at a primary school once where I was giving a presentation, and so I said to the kids, did you know that one of the best things you could do after this would be go out and eat some soil? And it's like, the whole hall erupted, and all the teachers were trying to constrain the children, like, you mustn't do that. But that set me thinking, and kids, that I think more and more, if we can reach the children more, that's why I'm bringing out, don't mind me just showing this. This is my latest book, it's coming out in January, it's No Dig Gardening for Children. Oh, because I'm noticing that kids get it. So what I was saying before, that thing, it makes sense, because it does, and they haven't got any preconceptions. So children will then bring in their parents, and that can set a big ball rolling, and that's what I want to do more. I want to empower loads of people, and that practical thing you were saying. I was working with another girl at my farm, and she'd been doing a very complicated soil compost through microscope approach to learning about compost, and she said she'd learned so much about amoeba and flagellates and protozoa, and that when she came to make a compost heap, she couldn't do it. She was daunted by it's maybe going to hurt something. So yeah, we really need the practical, and that's why I really like what you guys do. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Poppy, would love to hear from you about that, the importance of enabling learning to grow and farming to become more accessible, what your experience of that has been, and also kind of looking at the huge, like, diverse landscape of all the different ways that people are being taught about these essential subjects. What do you see as some of the key gaps that you would like to see kind of filled in the coming years?
Yeah, well, I think that the first key bit would probably be the empowering piece. And I think that, you know, empowering power, these words, I personally felt incredibly disempowered for a long time. And it's a funny thing when you suddenly realize you do actually have a lot of, like, ability to make change. It's like a light switch kind of like goes. But unless you have a catalyst to help that moment happen, I think that many of us go around kind of a bit like, oh, you know, a sense of total powerlessness to the state of the world, or maybe even not questioning the state of the world because the thought of powerlessness is too overwhelming. So for me, I feel like the inspiration bit is really, really important. And I don't know if I'm necessarily teaching inspiration as much as trying to communicate what inspires me, because I think that inspiration helps to unlock imagination, which is empowering. And when we start to understand that we have the ability to actualize our visions, it kind of changes everything. And I do think that in the garden, that is a space where we have very real lived experience of that, where we kind of dream of what we want next spring, and you go through the process in collaboration with other life forms and maybe even other people, and it becomes a real thing. And I think that is one of the most inspiring things about growing. So I suppose that's the gap that I think can be filled. And I came from Steiner's education till I was 12, that was in South Africa, and then moved to the UK, went into mainstream education. And it was very it was very acute, the experience of switching from an environment that was encouraging active imagination and creativity and creation, becoming a creator rather than just a consumer, versus switching into an environment where the focus was on churning out people with the 3 R's, you know, was it reading, writing and arithmetic? Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that is the biggest gap that I see today, is a sense of empowerment and the imagination that's required to create that. Yeah.
Vandana and Charles, would you agree as these as kind of key barriers to this movement and the scaling of ecosystem restoration and agroecology, or would you say that there maybe are other barriers and blocks?
I'd say there are others, by the way. That's just, I think there's hundreds of them there, yeah.
Well, how do you mean exactly?
What,
are there other barriers?
Like what do you see as barriers?
The whole way people's minds work, which, going back to exactly what you say, they've gone through school and they've been taught to obey the voice of authority. And that's so disempowering for them. And they need to get out of that way of thinking and realize that they can work things out. So encouraging people to think and discover, imagine.
Mm-hmm. I think the new barrier will be deep exclusions. You know, if earlier we had education for a narrow teaching, now there'll be exclusion even from that. And I think we have to find imaginative ways to connect those who are being dispossessed today with those who were dispossessed yesterday and the day before, so that we can all be liberated together for the future. Because I was just thinking, you know, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, I said, yeah, that's why they say artificial intelligence will win, because those 3 things they can do. They're teaching kids coding at 6 years in India. 6-year-old kids are being told all you need to do is learn coding. At a time where Apple has collapsed 1 trillion, everyone's throwing out their workforce, everyone is preparing to prepare a workforce for an economy that's dismantling itself. And I think that's why the education for life, education for living, education from nature, you know, just knowing, remembering that we are part of the earth and how to live as good earth citizens. I think that's necessary not just for those who are ecologically minded. I think it will become necessary for those who thought the state would take care of them, because it's not going to take care.
Yeah.
It won't. We have to take care of each other.
And just to go a bit deeper into that, the deep exclusion, who is being excluded and why, and what are they being excluded from?
Well, earlier all other beings were excluded. You know, they didn't count. The soil organisms didn't count. Animals didn't count. They were just objects. The earth herself didn't count. And you know, it takes brilliant scientists like Lynn Margolis to work with James Lovelock to remember she's Gaia, and then they're censored. I mean, the kind of science Lynn Margolis did, every school kid should be reading. So all those systems of knowledge that went with it. But I think people who work are being excluded. The peasants who produce food, produce most of the food that we eat, being excluded. Women have been excluded. Indigenous people have been excluded. But now we need to turn it, you know, if you turn it on its head and say, no, that anthropocentric exclusion and the capitalocentric exclusion, because capital doesn't create anything. It's parasitic on the creative of the earth and people. Then we can start a new learning. That the earth is creative, we are creative. Let's join hands.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to ask a question? Tracy.
Oh, Tracy. I'm very concerned that this net zero agenda that is being spread around the world is actually dividing us in a big way, just because, yes, we are contributing probably to the greenhouse effect, but are what is being put forward as a solution actually not very CO2 intensive, and therefore are we actually not being conned to get onto a bandwagon which has been basically hijacked? And it's a big business agenda, it's high-tech farming. I'd love Vandana to have a jolly good rant on that one. And perhaps Charles.
Hello to Tracy, and the pigs were excluded. She's there for the pigs. You're so right. You know, the first time I read Net Zero was not in climate negotiations. It was in Bill Gates' book, how to deal with a climate catastrophe. And where he talks about net zero, he says net zero doesn't mean real zero. He says it very clearly. Net zero means we continue to pollute, but we find sinks elsewhere for offsetting. So it's a double scam. First, because polluters should pay and stop polluting. You know, the Catholic Church collapsed because it was dealing with indulgences, you know. The bishops would say, yeah, just give us gold. It's all right, you can keep sinning. You know, these things called indulgences where wealth was given to the bishops to be forgiven for your sin. But sin doesn't get forgiven by transferring wealth. Sin means stop sinning. So the sin of climate change and climate pollution and emissions is those who pollute must stop polluting. That was the original UN treaty. Polluters must pay and polluters must stop polluting. The three new false climate solutions are all new blocks. And that's why when you talk about the new division, so important. The first is geoengineering, continuing the idea of mastery, as if the climate can be managed by putting more pollutants. I always say, if pollution was the problem, how can more pollution be the solution? Yeah? Because putting sulfur in the sky and putting pollutants in the sky, that's a big geoengineering problem. The second is the net zero, carbon offsets, carbon sinks, which will lead to appropriation of the last remaining land and biodiversity in the hands of indigenous people. Because this is where the sinks will happen. The third, which is even more serious, is criminalizing animals. You know, nature has created the animals. Every ecosystem, from the forest to farms, need animals. You know, Albert Howard has written, every good farm has to have perennial trees, animals, and animal crops, and recycling of nutrients between all three. To basically go from the destruction of the Amazon, which should have never happened for GM soya, to jump from there, instead of saying protect the Amazon, kill the animals, not only is it illogical, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. So the war against animals, you know, and dumbing down humanity's understanding that we are an animal, and breaking our solidarity with non-human animals in a strange way where you think you're saving the world by killing life on Earth. So that division is very, very vital right now, and we have to deal with it as the farming movement, the food movement, the ecology movement. They're just like, it isn't the case in South African apartheid, that because you took the land from the original people, you could now say they don't have rights. In a similar way, you can't have made factory farming the norm for the last 20 years only, and then destroy all forms of living with animals. You know? All forms, all non-violent forms. And anyway, you can't cut off. I mean, people were getting very, very nervous and fussy, you know. I was just saying, I was looking at the books downstairs, and I said, you know, ask what you ate.
Okay.
Yeah? On the soil issue. Yeah. The point is, those who think, oh, I'll eat only plants. Well, the plants ate animals. You know, stop breaking the cycle and stop disrupting the connections. Stop the violence and shift to again Satish, you know, ahimsa. Non-violence. Non-violence is the root. But that's where the big, if the last 2 years we were locked down with COVID, the next 10 years is going to be new human rights restrictions in the name of climate solutions, false climate solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. Charles and Poppy, would you like to add anything?
Well, very well put. And I suppose I have this like real strong sense that in the world, in the lives that we lead today. So many of us, we experience getting on the tube, going to the office, come out the office, get back in the tube, sit on your sofa, watch the telly, eat a ready meal, do it again. And there's no moment of like having time to connect with these complex systems that you're referring to. So when people do read about them or hear about them, they're very abstract and overwhelming. So I think that something that I find reassuring, I suppose, is stats like the fact that 87% of people in the UK have access to gardens. So despite the fact that we can't access like 92% or so of land, many of us do have access to these small spaces. So I think in the face of this like huge deadening and simplification of life, I think that there is so much hope. And I think that's all that I would add.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where we want to be, on the front foot and being positive about this, because it is hard to fight the. It's so true. This climate, I've been keeping weather records for a long time, and the confusion of weather and climate, I feel is dangerous. But I see the climate word being used to justify restrictions, and it's like, that's such a bad place to go. But we can just connect with soil more, and that opens so many doors. It's such a positive thing to do. So that's for me is where we have to go. And then that also, this connection between the soil biome and the gut biome, you suddenly find that your brain's working better, and you feel better, and then you feel stronger. And then maybe lots of us can get together and find solutions. I don't know yet, but we've got to start. It's down to all of us, all of you. Go for it.
I just want to say two things. In America, the whole issue of gardening was introduced to prisons. And these very violent people who were in jail for crime started to change. Non-violence, education for non-violence. The garden became an education for non-violence. And the soil connection and climate change, I think part of what's gone wrong, and that's why they don't allow the Gaia theory to become more popular. Because Lynn and James established that the biosphere manages the climate and regulates the climate. So if you can cut off the biosphere, you can destroy it more, and then try and manage the climate to your convenience. And I think we've got to focus back on the biosphere.
Brilliant.
Yeah? And that's the reason I wrote soil, not oil. That soil is the solution.
And biodiversity.
And biodiversity.
Of opinion as
soil
much
cannot be
as
soil without biodiversity.
Living soil.
Thank you so much. I think we're at time now. We're actually a bit over, and I just want to share my thanks to everyone for listening, for being here, and to Poppy, Charles and Vandana for sharing your wisdom again with us all. You've had a profound impact on us and the world, and I really love, Vandana, how you just brought the conversation back to human rights. And I think it's when you become so connected and impassioned by the environment, kind of if we don't have freedom and liberation being at the front and center of our movements and of our energy, and our intention and our initiatives, then a lot of our work can become lost. And I think it's something that we're going to be seeing much more of. So really kind of uniting the movements for liberation with movements for ecology, bringing those together so we can really create a diversity of cultures that are in real alignment with nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you.